podcast of The Jason Gregor Show from TSN 1260. Powered by Sky Residences. Live up, play down in the heart of Ice District. Stylish 1- and 2-bedroom homes starting from $320,000. See it for yourself at liveskycondos.com.
Well, magnificent Monday afternoon. How are you? Welcome to the show. Hope you had a fulfilling weekend. Whatever it was. If you're a sports fan, you probably had emotional overload. Lots happening. Lots happening. If you're at the Eskimo game on Saturday, 90 points. How often do you get that in a game? At almost 900 passing yards. That is entertainment. Not every game has to be perfectly played or perfectly executed. That was entertaining. And it literally came right down to the final play. Oh, my goodness. Eskimo fans would have lost it, I think, if the Stampeders had completed the pass on the Hail Mary. But they didn't. And the Esks get a big win. And they do it without C.J. Gable, without Darrell Walker, Duke Williams for a short period of time. You know, Calgary had some of their big guns out as well. I loved it. It was back and forth. It was entertaining football. Take it all day. Well, Mike Riley, 3 touchdown passes. He also ran for 3 touchdowns. Bo Levi Mitchell, 491 passing yards, 4 TDs. He also threw 3 picks. Well, lots going on in that game. I loved it. Lots of big plays. Especially on Calgary's side of the ball. Edmonton had a fair share, right? Mitchell, Williams, Kenny Stafford had some decent plays. Eskimos were, I think, a little bit more methodical maybe at times, where Calgary would do nothing and then boom, one quick hitter. Crush the defense. And the Eskimos, albeit slim, still have a chance to catch the Calgary Stampeders. It's unlikely. Right? They are 2 games behind them. Now, the Saskatchewan Roughriders technically are in second place right now because they have a game in hand. They're 7-4. Meanwhile, the Eskimos are 7-5, and the Eskimos head into their bye week. Winnipeg also in a bye week. And Toronto. You look at the BC Lions, they've only played 10 games, so the Lions will catch up some games. They had a massive win. The Lions, don't count them out. They have 4 wins to Winnipeg's 5, and they have 2 games in hand. And they're in Montreal. So the Winnipeg Blue Bombers, who a lot of people at the start of the season felt like, you know what? They look pretty good. They're kind of in disarray right now. Matt Nichols kind of looks like the Matt Nichols prior to last year. And that's why you wonder, was last year an anomaly for him? We'll see. Can he bounce back? Will they give him the opportunity? Will they go to Strevler? They got the bye week, so they'll try to figure it out. Meanwhile, NFL, many of you got after it. Connor Halley, another disappointing loss to start the season for the LA Chargers. Like, I don't know if there's a team that has more tough losses than the Chargers. Like, I think it was 2 years ago they lost by 3 points or less, like 8 times. Then they had a massive run of injuries last year. Then they went on a good run in the second half. And did they drop 4 touchdown passes yesterday?
4 of that probably would have been touchdown passes. Travis Benjamin had 2 himself. They fumbled the ball inside the 10. They gave up a punt return to Tyreek Hill, which I think a few teams are going to do this year because that guy's an animal. Yeah, it was a tough loss yesterday, but I'm not too worried about it. I still think they'll bounce back from it.
Well, hey.
They get Buffalo next week.
Well, oh my goodness.
Saving grace right there.
Jeez. I think Peterman from Seinfeld would be a better quarterback right now than Peterman that the Bills have. Horrific.
Yeah, not a very good offensive line there. I don't know how many quarterbacks will have success.
That's true.
They have to be mobile.
You need a good O-line.
Not sure why they let Tyrod Taylor go to Cleveland, but that's Buffalo.
Speaking of Tyreek Hill, now he's not the best player in the NFL, but for my money, he is the most exciting player in the league. I don't know if there's a more exciting player than Hill. Punt return. Look now as a receiver. Like, look at his second touchdown. He catches it across the middle and literally just runs away from the chart. Like, he makes guys who are fast look slow. That's how fast he is. That guy's entertainment. If you're a Chiefs fan, you're pretty lucky. You're probably watching every game. And you got Big Arm Mahomes, the Chiefs, who have one of only 3 teams to make the playoffs 3 years in a row. They had a good start. They traded Alex Smith because they felt like Mahomes is ready. And for one game, it's only one game, but he looked ready. He looked good. What about the Bengals? They lose one of their best defenders. Like, I have no problem with the officials calling that, flagging that for a headshot. No doubt about it. But is that worthy of kicking a guy out of the game? It's going to be a tough question to answer. I didn't see any malice or intent on that play. So he'll have to try to adjust to it in the future. Maybe they're trying to send a message. I'm not necessarily certain if that's the way to go about it. Because every game matters when you only have a 16-game season. That could be huge. But the Bengals overcame it. They get a victory. And the Cleveland Browns. Dennis, the Browns fan, and the other Browns fans, hey, your team's not 0-1 for the first time since 2004. Now, how is that? That's unbelievable. That was probably the most funny stat I have seen in a long time. Best start to a season since 2004, and it's 0-1. And I know some people are like, hey, they should be happy with the tie. No, they shouldn't. You get an interception in the final 36 seconds of overtime. You bring the ball inside the 20, and you get it blocked? Like, if you miss it, at least you're like, well, for a brief moment, we had a chance. You get it blocked, it's not even up. Like, oh, my goodness. But Steeler fans, now I know everybody was freaking out because of one emoji sent by Le'Veon Bell. And is that the I see you emoji? Honestly, like, my emoji game's terrible. Other than the thumbs up and the smile, I don't know what any of them means, right? Like, sure, if I look at it, you're like, oh, there's a cow. I think it means cow. But does that mean he's like watching you, paying attention? Is that what that's supposed to mean?
I think he's saying he sees what's happening.
Okay.
He's watching. He knows.
So now, and people are all like, oh, that means he's all ripping on his team. Well, maybe he's watching that Connor had a really good running game. However, did he not fumble in the fourth quarter? And trust me, turnovers are crucial. People are like, oh, the Steelers don't need Le'Veon Bell. I'm like, well, let's pump the brakes on that. They don't need Le'Veon Bell, but they couldn't beat the team that has one win in the last 2 seasons. I might want to pump the brakes on they don't need Bell. Bell's pretty good. Yeah, I know Connor was good, but he's not Le'Veon Bell. He's good. He's just not as good as Le'Veon Bell. So if they could trade him and get other positions, then I would probably do that if I'm the Steelers. Right? If you feel you've got a running back where, okay, the gap's small, then why not move Le'Veon Bell to another team and get some players in return? Wouldn't that be better for your organization? Although, right? Why not do that? So they could have done that in the offseason. Now what are they doing? Now they're just strong-arming a guy who's like, well, whatever. I'll sit out till week 4, week 6, whatever week it's going to be. Week 11, as a lot of people are speculating. Then he comes back, doesn't have the workload, leaves in the offseason, signs as a free agent. So what message did the Steelers send? I'm not sure. I'm not sure it's a winning one. That's all I know. But it's only one game, but all I'm saying is you can't say, well, they don't need Bell when they couldn't beat the team that has one win in 2 seasons. Couldn't beat them. And they probably should have lost to him outside of a heroic block field goal.
I'm curious how many people were like me and the friends that I watched with. There was 5 of us, and none of us thought they were going to hit that field goal. We thought it's going wide. They're going to hit the upright. They're not going to win this game because they're the Cleveland Browns. And, of course, it gets blocked.
Yeah.
Like, my group, 100%. No one had faith that they were going to make that field goal.
Yeah, well, you're all pessimistic bastards.
We put it out there in the universe. Yeah. It's on us.
Edmonton Oilers, rookies. It's a rookie game. But, goaltenders didn't have a great night. And that's what happens afternoon, to be technically correct. It's a rookie game. You got some young guys. That'll happen. Some positives from that game. Tyler Benson played. Tyler Benson was healthy his first game. He also, basically now, imagine your 2 front teeth. Basically, he has like a half moon shape. Took a stick. First rookie game for him in 3 years. He was ecstatic about it. Talked to him today. Like, just genuinely happy to be healthy for the first time. Really, for him, at least in Oiler camp in 3 years. Right, last season, from the end of October, basically October 27th through until now, he's been healthy. Hasn't been able to say that for a long time. And just mentally, how much of a relief that is for him. He's very confident that this will be the best year of his development wherever he plays. Just like, I'm just going to get to play. If I get to play in the American League, awesome. I'm going to be able to challenge myself, push myself. I'm healthy. I can practice healthy. His words, it's hard to get better when you can only practice at 60%. He had the sports hernia for a long time. They finally got it fixed properly, and now he's good to go. Another guy I had a good conversation with, Caleb Jones, who I fully expect to be in the American League this year. But he had some real honest assessments on, I liked his analogy. It was like a slap in the face when he went to the American League last year, and just he found it much harder than he was expecting. And that, Struddy said it on the show lots. The jump from the CHL to the American League is harder than jump from the American League to the NHL. And that's why the players that do make it directly from CHL to the NHL, goodness, that's how good they are. Like, that's ridiculous. It's hard. And then it's hard to maintain success doing it. But you suddenly go from, played against basically your peers who are either, when you're in midget and Bantam, you're playing guys who are either the same age as you or a year older or a year younger, right? Then you get to junior, and as a 16-year-old rookie, sure, you can play against a few 20-year-olds, some 19s and 18s. It's a little bit of a gap. But then usually you come out, now you've played as a 19-year-old in junior or an 18-year-old in junior, and you're one of the older ones. And you're more of the talented one. And you're a little bit stronger. And then you go into pro, and now suddenly you're playing against men. Some of them, 27, 28. Lots of them, mid-20s. And it is a big challenge, mentally and physically. He said he learned a lot. First time in his career it ever really struggled. That's probably something we forget. A lot of these guys come up and they're the best players on their team all the time. And it doesn't mean that they don't try. They've worked really hard to become the best. And it doesn't come easy because hard work is never easy. You got to commit to yourself, but your opposition and the pushback maybe isn't that difficult. Now you get to the pros, it's a whole new ballgame. And he feels, Caleb Jones, that experience will really help him. He also said that he kind of felt like he was chasing his game all year. Lack of confidence. Maybe when he saw a play, he tried to beat a guy rather than just make a play. Wants to shoot the puck more. So we'll hear from Caleb Jones today. Also, the Pacioretty trade happens late last night. Montreal Canadiens. All things considered in that scenario, Pacioretty wasn't re-signing there. Now, maybe that's on the GM. He's probably partly responsible for that. And the coaches they've hired, for sure. But he wasn't signing there. So they end up getting Thomas Tatar at $4.8 million because Vegas eats a little bit of his salary. They get Suzuki, 13th overall pick that Vegas had traded up to get last year. And then a second rounder. So decent return if those guys pan out. Tatar is not as good as Pacioretty, no doubt about it. Now Vegas, on the other hand, not only they trade for Pacioretty, George McPhee then signs him to a 4-year extension. Not 6, not 7, 4. After he signed Paul Stastny as a free agent for 3. So do not ever tell me that, well, you had to do this. Teams have to sign these guys for 6 and 7-year deals. No, you don't. Because those are the ones, and neither one of those guys, like Pacioretty's a really good player, right? He's not an elite player, but he's a really good player. And he has scored since 2011-12, tied for the third most even-strength goals in the NHL. Ovechkin's the most. Then Patrick Kane has one more than Pacioretty and Brad Marchand. Right? He's a pretty good goal scorer, no question. He's never really had a dominant center at all during that time, so good for him. He'll turn 30 in December. Right? So we think he'll slip a little bit. But now it's only a 4-year contract. So you're not on the hook for the final few years where you basically kind of, when you sign that contract, it's like, man, we really hope he can hold out for the final few years of that deal. Much less risk. Good deal for Vegas. They feel they can compete right now in the Pacific that is void of a really elite team. Should be a lot of competitive teams, but there's no elite team right now. Give McPhee credit. It's a good move. Get Pacioretty now for basically 5 years because you get him this year plus 4 more. Nick Suzuki might be a player. We'll see. I will say this. I saw Corey Pronman say at mediocre at best speed. I think that is grossly inaccurate. Grossly inaccurate to claim that he has mediocre at best speed. He's not a burner, but mediocre is a very harsh assessment of a young player skating. You're not 13th overall pick with mediocre skating. I'm sorry. You're just not. Right? Now, there might be other parts of your game that aren't there, but as a forward, no. Doesn't happen. We've seen in the past maybe some big defensive defensemen that get drafted too high, don't have great skating ability. That's accurate. Rarely for forwards. When you say mediocre, like I think that's going a little bit too far. Also, the big story over the weekend was Serena Williams, the USO. And trust me, she got pounded in the first set. Right? 6-2. It wasn't close. Then, got a little bit of drama. Now, if you want to talk about the umpire and how he stepped over the line by giving her the coaching violation, here's the thing. Okay, and that's fair. But here's the thing. Serena lied by saying, I've never coached, I've never cheated. Her coach admitted after the game in an interview, yeah, I've done it all the time. All of us do it. So don't say you've never done it, because that's a lie. Right? Then she goes on to say, well, this has always happened at the U.S. Open. No, it's happened a few times, and you freaked out, and that's fine. And I think we have to separate two things here. Evaluate Williams on what occurred yesterday. Not big picture, everything else. This has nothing to do with the idiotic decision. And I came on here and supported Serena Williams for the ability to wear that catsuit. It's ridiculous that the French Tennis Confederation doesn't want her to use that. Asinine, right? Just like it was dumb when the girls would get penalized for a violation for having a sports bra on and taking their shirt off. Give me a break. Right? But here's the thing. Serena Williams, and the second violation, whose fault is that? She had a temper tantrum. She broke her tennis racket. That got her the first penalty. No one else. Not supposed to do it. Lots of players, male or female, will get that violation. It's pretty clear. Right? Now the third one. People are going to talk, it's because she said thief. I don't believe it's because she used the word thief. It's because everything she did. Remember when she was sitting down and, you owe me an apology, like berating him like a child. And that guy was calm the whole time. Then remember when she said, well, if you're not going to apologize, don't talk to me. So what's he do? He's like, you know what? I'm going to try to diffuse the situation. He said nothing. So she's like, you don't talk to me, but I'll talk to you when I want. She went on a power trip. Guess what? She got burnt. She tried to go on the power trip over and over and wouldn't let it go. And then finally he was like, okay, enough. Every time you come back and sit down, you're still talking about it. Move on. So one violation causes her to freak out? No. She was freaking out because she was down. Keep in mind that at the time when the third violation came in, she had been outplayed 10 games to 5 at that point. Because she lost 6-2 and then she was down 4-3. Okay? That's 10-5. She wasn't as good. So she's frustrated. Sure, like a lot of people would be. But I don't think every time something happens, it always has to turn into a sexist situation. Can't always be that way. Serena Williams wasn't a perfect, innocent bystander here that was just, oh my goodness, attacked. I think that's taken it too far. I'd like to ask why he decided that was the right time to hand out the first violation. But if you can't get over that as a player, then there's a big problem there. Right? That's one violation. It didn't cost her anything. That's coaching violation cost her nothing, that original one. Now then she has to smash her hand. That's what got her the first losing of 1 point. So you're down 15-love before the game starts. It's 1 point. And that just seemed to unravel her. So I think if we look at the whole, and Serena Williams is still the greatest tennis player in the world. And the one thing I don't like is a lot of people, I've lost respect for her now. Oh, what? Because she had one little blowout? Give me a break. You can't lose respect for someone because they're not perfect. I don't expect them to be perfect. I've lost no respect for Serena Williams at all. I just disagree with the notion of everybody saying that she was somehow the victim in this. That's what I disagree with. I still think she's the greatest. She arguably one of the greatest athletes. She might be in the top 3 for sure, male or female, since 2000. She has been dominant. She's unbelievable. And there are some detractors in the tennis world because they don't like her because she's so dominant. That's obvious. Right? She's a powerful, strong black woman, and some in the tennis world don't like it. No doubt about it. But that's not the only, that umpire had an impeccable resume. Impeccable. No one had ever spoke negative about him. His actions, how he said it, was calm. He was never demeaning. He was never on, and was just listening to her. He's like, okay, she's venting. I'll take it. I'll keep taking it. And then finally he's like, okay, sorry. Here you go. Third violation. What's he supposed to do? Just let her be like a spoiled brat and keep ranting and raving? Demanding an apology? She was grandstanding. Oh, well. She let her emotions get the best of us. We've all done it. And to me, that's kind of where it stops. I don't lose any respect for Serena. She's still going to go down as probably the greatest female tennis player of all time, one of the greatest athletes of all time. Awesome. She had one little meltdown. That's okay. But let's not make it more than it is. Listen to Jason Gregor Show. You can always text us at 10-1260. You can dial us up at 444-1260. You can email us in our Jiffy Lube inbox, Gregor at tsn1260.ca. When we come back, Kevin Woodley will join us from In Goal Magazine and NHL.com. Ho, 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 the chest protectors. Is this going to be an ongoing saga? Is it going to be an ongoing saga? We'll find next on The Gregor Show, presented by Grand Villa Casino.
This is a podcast of The Jason Gregor Show from TSN 1260. Powered by Sky Residences. Live up, play down in the heart of Ice District. Stylish 1- and 2-bedroom homes starting from $320,000. See it for yourself at liveskycondos.com.
227 rolling right along. Edmonton Sports Theater, TSN 1260. Game day tonight, doubleheader. How many of you are in the fantasy football category where you're like, man, I really need some big nights from a few guys tonight? I got Goff, Cooks, and Golden Tate going tonight. So basically I need an average of 20 points from all three of them. So it's possible. It's possible. But because I'm not sure Oakland or the Jets' defenses are great. So we'll see what happens. But it's never a great feeling when you go to Monday night being like, man, I need three guys and all of them have to have a good night.
Yeah, I need 50 yards from Amari Cooper or a touchdown.
That's it.
That's all I need to win one. The other league, I'm out of it. No chance.
Amari Cooper.
Just one big play. That's all I ask.
Just maybe get him to call Tyreek Hill. He'll show you a few big plays. Let's get to the big guest today, brought to you by Alberta Mortgage Funding. For over 25 years, AMF has provided equity loans for Albertans without checking credit or income. For fast approvals, apply online at albertafunding.com. Kevin Woodley from In Goal Magazine and NHL.com joins us, as he always does. Woodley, how you doing?
I'm good. Can you guys dial me up about 50 points for Todd Gurley tonight while you're at it?
Oh, that's pretty easy. Oh, 50 points. I thought you meant yards. But you just have a terrible team. You need 50 points.
Yesterday was depressing. Like, just depressing.
Well, stop drafting goalies.
I've come to both hate and love Sunday.
Stop drafting goalies in your fantasy football. That would probably help you.
Yeah, that might be a problem.
Here we are. Rookie camps have started. A lot of young goalies get their first action against other young top prospects, if you want to call it that. I know you were in Penticton, the Canucks and the Jets, and this isn't ideal, I don't think, for anyone. The Canucks, the Jets, the Oilers, or the Flames, because they're basically, Edmonton and Calgary will play each other twice. Edmonton will play the Grant McHugh and Nate, which they played before when they used to play the Bears on top of that tournament, and Vancouver and the Jets just play each other. So maybe they'll be able to find a way to rotate it in the future, 1 year in Penticton, the next year in Red Deer, and have all four teams again. But let's talk about DiPietro for a young goalie and some changes he made this summer.
You know what? And it's funny because I've been perhaps accused of being a touch too critical in the Vancouver market when I talk about him. And every time I talk about him, it's with the caveat, like, I love this kid. I love his attitude. I've had the pleasure of being around him, in a sort of video coaching capacity at Hockey Canada. And in addition to incredible skill set and just a desire and compete level that's off the charts, he's got a personality and a character that other players just gravitate towards. We know goalies don't wear the C, but they can be leaders, and he's got all those qualities. That said, since the day the Canucks drafted him, there have been some things in his game that I really honestly believed had to change if he was going to be an NHL goaltender. Things that, I saw pro shooters take advantage of when they kept him around at training camp last year, just light him up over the pads low. And, it's sort of tied into the mechanics of tracking that we talked about, or we have talked about, over the past couple of years. And there was an element there that was just missing in his setup where he got so hunched over and sort of on top of the puck with his chest that he didn't have any ability to get to the ice without pulling everything back and off and opening up and sort of losing what we would consider peak visual attachment as the puck's coming at him. And frankly, I know goalie coaches in the OHL had seen it. Even the year he won the Memorial Cup, as good as he was in the Cup final, they were eliminated, Windsor was, in the first round. And part of that was the scouting report that, you attack him low over the pads. As much as people say, he's 6 foot, he's vulnerable up high, he wasn't. He was vulnerable down low. You could see specifically when you broke down the video the mechanics that created that. And until he fixed it, I thought it was going to be a problem. And lo and behold, it appears he fixed it. And he was really good up in Penticton. Only played the one game, but more watching him, frankly, I don't even judge him that much by the one game against Winnipeg, because the Canucks have, a really impressive group of young prospects up there. Patterson, Dahlin, Gaudette, Petrus Palmu, guys that are going to be a part of their sort of core future. And Winnipeg very much does not. So I was judging him more in practice when he was facing Elias Pettersson's shot and seeing Jonathan Dahlin's shot and Adam Gaudette. And, the game looked easy to him. He looked more efficient. He looked quieter. And when I talked to him about it afterwards and talked to the goalie coaches, the Canucks goalie coaches, they're seeing the same thing. And for Mike, game's just slowing down. That was his comment after the first one. He's like, the game's just slowing down for me. Everything's just looks slow out there. I don't feel like it's too fast for me. And that wasn't the case even last year, even at a prospects camp. So this bodes well for the Canucks in terms of what they have here in DiPietro. And I don't believe that his size will be an issue. But more to the point, this season, this bodes well for Hockey Canada at the World Junior Championships here in Vancouver, and a chance for DiPietro to shine in front of the crowd and the sort of the home crowd in Vancouver and Victoria, where the tournament will be hosted, that he's going to be playing in front of hopefully for years to come. Still be some AHL time, 2, 3, 4 years down the road, but for a kid that checked a lot of boxes already, the one that was missing to me has been checked this summer through his work with Hockey Canada and with goalie coach Lyle Mass, and working that in with Perry Wilson, who he works with in Ontario, and even the Canucks staff. It just a lot of things coming together for this kid at a young age, and a lot of promise there.
Kevin Woodley from Ingo Magazine and NHL.com joins us. DiPietro, of course, a pretty good chance, Kevin, I think, to be Canada's goalie at the World Juniors. Now, a lot of people are wondering, you look at Bobrovsky with the Blue Jackets. They haven't been able to win with him. And if they're not willing to sign him to a Carey Price type contract, they're probably going to lose him. What do you think happens in Columbus? Do they just play out the whole season if they're in the playoffs, or do you think there's a chance they might trade him mid-season?
To me, this is good. The irony here is I actually don't think Columbus is that good a team overall. I think that Bobrovsky, and I've talked about this before, there are only a couple goaltenders in this league that can truly outperform their environment, that can raise a mediocre team to playoff level and, or get on a playoff run. And, a lot of guys can get on a short playoff run, but not as many guys can sort of really lift up a mediocre team. I think he's one of those guys. And so the catch-22 here is he might be the biggest, not the only, but the biggest reason Columbus makes the playoffs this year. So, and if he has that type of season, he's won 2 Vezinas in the past, 4 years, and arguably should have been a finalist again this past season. If he's the biggest reason you have a chance to make the playoffs, how do you deal that? And yet, you haven't been able to succeed with him in the playoffs. And as you said, listen, this is not a secret. I am not surprised by the Panarin or Bobrovsky stuff. Panarin sort of, in terms of him leaving Columbus, that broke first this summer. But I don't necessarily believe that that's the order that this decision happens. I think they've known that Bob is likely gone even before that. And it's going to take Price-like numbers, and that's not something they've indicated that they're willing to do. So what do you do? If he's your best chance of any success this season, how do you deal him in a market that's still, sort of waiting to have playoff success? It's as good as that market is, and I really think it's one of the undervalued markets and cities for NHL players. they still need to build and have success. They can't afford to throw away a season, and Bob gives them the best chance to do that. And yet, unless you're willing to come out of your boots to give him a lot of money, he's not sticking around. So let's just put it this way. I don't know how this is going to go. I do know that that's the type of offer it's going to take. I believe that firmly from talking to people around his camp, that's what it's going to take to keep him. If you're not willing to do that, I think you have to try and maximize value for him. And yet, can you flush an entire season? Because as good as I think Korpisalo can be, and there's mixed opinions on him, and as much as I think Elvis Merzlikins, the Latvian who's playing in the Swiss League, was a Swiss Hockey Goalie of the Year last year, he can be an NHL star in a couple of years. There's nobody like Bob in the here and now. And so for short term, I think what you have to do, and reading interviews with Tortorella in The Athletic, it sounds like he understands this, is you have to give Korpisalo more starts and maybe live with some growing pains early in the season rather than just defaulting to Bob, knowing that your organization may force you in that direction at some point anyways. It will be a lot easier decision to make if you gave Korpisalo enough chance to show you he's ready to carry that load than just to dump him and see what happens when you do.
What about Carey Price, who will enter this season tied with Connor McDavid for the second highest salary? John Tavares actually has the highest at $15.9 after just signing that deal for actual money paid this year. Carey Price is 31 years of age, and his last few years for Carey Price-like numbers haven't been outstanding, right? He had a 900 save percentage last year, a 311 goals against average. Obviously, the worst of his NHL career. Even I think going back to junior, he never had one that high. So what are you expecting from Carey Price, Kevin? And how important of a season is this for his confidence and maybe even for the Habs to think, okay, you know what, he still can be a top 5 goalie in the NHL?
Well, I mean, let's not. It was just 1 year, so it wasn't a couple of years. It was just the one bad season. But it was an aberration. It was so far out of left field from what we expect from him. 928 save percentage over the previous 4 seasons combined. The injuries, the age, those questions get asked, and I guess we have to ask them. But I would bet money on him having a bounce-back season, especially if the structure in front of him improves. That said, overall, the team in front of him isn't that good, and it's not getting better. They trade Pacioretty for mostly futures. Thomas Tatar is a serviceable second liner, overpaid probably for what he's capable of. But talking to other people, I'm leaning more towards, when you talk about bad seasons, I'm leaning more towards the last year or so being the real Thomas Tatar as opposed to what he did leading up to that. So I don't know that, they've got more futures than they have current there, and you've got an aging goaltender on a massive ticket with a huge reputation. If he rebuilds that reputation, and my hunch is he will have a good season this year. Not that I would ever suggest they're looking to move him, but if they're going full rebuild mode, if they finally sort of adopt that and start fully investing in the future, it's hard to see how he gives them more value there than he might be able to provide in a deal. There's a little part of me, and I kind of heard this through a third party this summer and had never even thought of it. I wouldn't be surprised if a couple years from now, especially if Charlie Lindgren continues to progress behind Carey and look like he can be a legitimate NHL starter coming up the ranks in the Canadian system over the next couple of years. Could Carey Price be the next Marc-Andre Fleury? If he tires and that market is hard on him, both in terms of not just the way they talk about him and are critical at times, but I mean, just in terms of lifestyle and not being able to have a life for the most part when he's there. What about Seattle? Could he be the next Marc-Andre Fleury in terms of a guy who, clearly has a good reputation but is aging and has a bigger ticket? And if the Canadians can find a solution coming up young behind him, would he accept that type of a move? I mean, You could market the heck out of him as a sort of franchise cornerstone like they did Fleury. I mean, he was the key piece for Vegas last year, in my opinion. You would have that in Carey, and for Carey a chance to. I mean, we know he loves the outdoors. We know he sort of loves the West Coast lifestyle here. You've seen him in the past couple of years basically go back to Montreal as late as he can contractually do so. Wife's family is from Washington State. I mean, it's a long ways down the road, and a lot of things would have to happen. But let's just say that I wouldn't be shocked the way things are moving if that was the type of situation we ended up in.
As we get closer, one final one for you. A goalie of the future, maybe. Boston Bruin fans. Is Daniel Vlader the guy that they think might be their future?
Yeah, he sure looked good, evidently, at prospects camp, and I saw a little bit of clips here and talked to goalie coaches over the past year plus about him. You never want to read too much into a prospects camp because it's still prospect shooting on you as well. But he's a guy that we've kind of had on our radar and talked to different people, at InGoal about over the past couple of years. And, there's been some articles published in the last little while about, the reality of Tuukka Rask in terms of what he's actually giving them compared to the rest of the league for value. And always seems to be questions, I think probably overdone for the most part about, is Tuukka done? Is he, I guess we throw that word elite around and the numbers say he's not anymore. So you're looking for a future there. You're looking for someone coming up the ranks. And, there is a lot to like about Daniel Vladar and talking to people I trust about style and attitude and all those components. Yeah, this could be the guy that eventually basically moves in and ultimately gives the Bruins someone, maybe even more so than Zane McIntyre, who's had success in the American League but not in the NHL, passes him and gives them someone finally that they can look to pass the torch to as a guy like Tuukka ages and gets towards the end of that contract. Because for the most part, they've been a team that, the last couple of years, as much as they've had sort of really young goalies, they've always had to find stopgaps for backup roles. And Vladar is not there yet. Don't get me wrong. He's not. There's a reason they went out and signed Jarl Halak. But eventually you're going to have to transition a young kid into that role with the eye towards replacing Tuukka, not just have a stopgap to give him more games off. And I believe that Vladar's a guy who will move into that role, like I said, even ahead of guys who were there before, like a Zane McIntyre. And obviously they've already moved on Malcolm Subban. One of these kids has to hit for them soon. And I got a hunch it could be Vladar.
Kev, we'll talk to you next week. We will have some preseason games to discuss. Should be great. Appreciate it.
Perfect. Thanks, Jason. Looking forward to a little more actual hockey with actual NHL players to go over.
You betcha. That's Kevin Woodley from InGoal Magazine and NHL.com. Our big guest today brought to you by Alberta Mortgage Funding, the number one choice for home equity loans. No fine print, no hidden fees. Give them a call, 470-3000. We'll take a quick break. When we come back, Grant Fedoruk is going to join us. And we talked about Tyler Benson earlier and just the importance of health. We'll talk about that next on the Jason Gregor Show, presented by Grand Village Casino.
This is a podcast of the Jason Gregor Show from TSN 1260, powered by Sky Residences. Live up, play down in the heart of Ice District. Stylish 1- and 2-bedroom homes starting from $320,000. See it for yourself at liveskycondos.com.
250 and Edmonton Sports Center, TSN 1260. Happy Monday to you. Some of you, if you're a Jets or a Lions fan or Rams or Raiders, you'll get in action tonight. Oiler fans can go watch a game at Rogers Place. Tomorrow night, Oiler rookies taking on Nate and Grant McEwen All-Star team. Then next week, the official preseason begins. NHL teams, the Oilers are in Calgary on Monday, Vancouver on Tuesday, and then they're home to the Winnipeg Jets next Thursday, the 20th. Also out in Red Deer, Wednesday of this week for another rookie game, Oilers versus the Flames after losing 7-3 yesterday. As we get now to the injury report brought to you by Capilano Rehab Center, helping you say goodbye to muscle and joint pain. Check them out at CapilanoRehab.com. From Capilano Rehab and Leading Edge Physio, Grant Fedoruk joins us once again. And Grant, I know when Struddy comes in, you're going to talk about injuries to his psyche of the
his ego.
His ego.
I don't think any of our treatments can help it.
But I do want to start off today. We're going to get into a shockwave therapy treatment, and then also IMS, which is because some people when I mentioned we were going to talk about this last week, a lot of people are like, I know IMS is good for me, but I have a real fear of needles. So do you have any idea how people who have a fear of needles can get over that? Because IMS does, and I guess first of all, maybe explain to people what IMS is.
Sure. I mean, don't look at the needles. They're more like pins. People have this fear of obviously the needle getting an injection, but there's no injection. So ultimately what IMS is kind of skipping to the procedure. It's a filament-like needle. It's an acupuncture needle. Little slightly higher gauge so that it's not as flimsy, so that we can get it a bit deeper into the muscles and affect change. And what we do is essentially find taut bands of muscle that are usually that way because of a process, either an injury process or a nervous system process, where the muscles have obviously shortened or via injury have got some scar tissue and so forth. And what we're doing is we're putting that needle into that tight tissue. And by applying that pressure of the needle into the tissue and moving it around, the muscle fibers actually wrap around the needle. And as they wrap around the needle, they activate something called a stretch reflex. We've got these things called spindles on the end of our muscles, and they sense stretch. And when they're activated, what they do is they actually contract. So it's the same process that you would use when somebody, dips down and then jumps really quickly. What they're doing is they're activating the stretch reflex. In order to do that, you stretch it and you'll get a maximal contraction of that muscle. So that's why it's uncomfortable. The treatment's not uncomfortable because of the needle going in. You get this discomfort because the muscle actually contracts even more. So you'd sit there and think to yourself, well, how is that going to help? Well, the second part of that stretch reflex that's really effective is you get maximal relaxation after that reflex. And so we can take muscle tissue that's been tight for a long period of time and affect immediate relaxation in the tissue. The discomfort because of the contraction of the muscle that's already tight. And if it's already been pulling on other painful structures or painful, nerves that actually are there for pain reasons, then you're going to get this discomfort with it. So the actual needle going in, I'll be frank, I don't think I've had a patient in several years who've ever said that was uncomfortable. Putting the needle in, it goes in there so quickly and they're so fine and they're really filaments, you don't notice it. But once you get that muscle contraction in a tight tissue, that's when it becomes a little bit uncomfortable. And I say a little bit, it depends on how tight the muscle is. But if you've had a deep tissue massage and you've had that trigger point where it's been held on and you're really feeling it, it feels like that, but it's brief and it's over. As you might know, it kind of comes and goes pretty quickly and right away the effects are immediate. So that's IMS in a nutshell.
I've had IMS many years ago. I actually had it today because I screwed up my calf a few weeks ago. And when I got it done on my calf, though, there was like an electronic volt sensation. And he's like, well, yeah, they're just in calves and biceps, something about the nerves or something like that.
Well, it can happen anywhere. So if you get contraction of the muscle, most often, very rarely are you actually hitting is the needle actually hitting the nerve. We're very careful about where we're applying the needle. We do have an extreme knowledge of anatomy. But that being said, when the muscle actually contracts, you do have nerves that are traveling in the area. And so you can get compression of those nerves and you can get that electrical sensation. Not what we're looking for, but it can happen, like you said, in the biceps. Piriformis is another area that we see that happen sometimes.
In your rear end.
That's right, in the rear end, because there's a lot of muscle in it. They're large muscle groups. They're very powerful muscle groups as well. And when they contract, they can put pressure on other nerves.
Is IMS essentially acupuncture, Scott asks?
No, it's not. You know what? They're quite different, actually. Acupuncture the philosophy is different. Why you're using it and where you're using it is different. The actual technique is different and the results are somewhat different. So the needle's the only thing that's really the same. When we do acupuncture, the needles are really applied at a not too deep we don't use a deep needling type technique. It's very superficial. We're using it for a different reason. Stimulate the release of endorphins and enkephalins in the body. Although in some spots there are trigger points, but we're using them also on a map of the body that's been created over generations of acupuncture points. Whereas it's very medical when you're having IMS. We're identifying taut muscle groups, taut muscles, and usually related to a spinal nerve segment. So we know which muscles are supplied by what nerve segment, and those muscles are the ones that we're treating. So very neuroanatomical rather than based on maps of acupuncture points.
Okay, Grant Fedoruk from Capilano Rehab and Leading Edge Physio joins us. Now, because a lot of people wonder, hey, if I have a sore back or tightness, like, how do you know when IMS is right?
Yeah, and that's for us to determine. So we really, that's the most important part of somebody coming in, is to sit down and have a chat with them, see what stage of healing they're in, how long the problem's been, and then it comes down to the assessment. And with IMS specifically, we're looking for very specific things. Loss of range of motion. So is there some joint, or is it, if we're talking about the back, has the person lost the ability to touch their toes? Or we're very, very specific things that we're looking for in their range of motion. We're looking for trigger points. So there's those tender taut bands. They're palpable. They're real. They exist. And the other thing that we're looking for is what we call more neuroanatomic things, like change of sensation, coldness in the tissue, because where the tissue is colder, we know that it's not getting the same circulation. So we know that there's constriction of the blood vessels, these sort of things. So once we put that pattern together, we're able to say, yes, in fact, IMS is appropriate for you.
Now, IMS isn't new, but it's newer, and it's kind of probably in the last 10, 15, 20 years.
More popular in the last 10 or 15 years.
For sure.
Absolutely.
Now, Shockwave, obviously something that you guys do as well.
Yeah.
So a quick explanation, like Shockwave, it's like a little machine gun. That's kind of what it sounds like, right?
It sounds like a jackhammer.
Yeah.
And we're firing sound waves, high pressured sound waves basically at 15 to 20 pulses per second. So it sounds like tick, 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 tick. And essentially what's happening in there is we are firing a little pebble at the speed of sound in a chamber, and it is striking metal, stainless steel sound head, which then generates a percussive force. And we're using that force. It's the same technology that's used to break up kidney stones, as a matter of fact, called lithotripsy.
So you would use shockwave on kidney stones?
So it's the same technology, except that what we're using is the radial shockwave. So it disperses the sound, the force wave, in a more general area than what they're using lithotripsy for, which is to a focal point, which is why we can use it on the outside of people's tissues. And what happens with the radial shockwave is several things. I think people often think that it's just they're breaking up scar tissue, but really what it's doing is creating a change in the fundamental way that your body is healing that tissue. And your cells can have different ways of expressing themselves. One of the main things that happens with radial shockwave is your body actually expresses these healing, I want to call them cells, called angiogenesis growth factors, these growth factors that are responsible for the healing process. And that's what happens when you have radial shockwave. It too, not the most comfortable thing, but when you're dealing with problems that have been resilient and around for a long time, and people are putting up with pain daily for their injuries, certainly a short period of time, and the radial shockwave as an example is done in 3 to 5 minutes. So it's over pretty quickly, very effective. You really only need to see somebody once a week. So as far as time constraints, and people have been investing a lot of time into their healing, we're not taking up a lot of that time. Typically, we see significant improvement after 6 weeks of the treatment, but we only do one treatment a week for 3 weeks, and then we leave it for a period of time and let the body go through that process, follow up at 6 weeks. And usually the complete healing process is around 3 months.
So how would you, what's better for shockwave or IMS? Which one works better? What's the differences on what they heal?
There's the art and the science. So shockwave, typically, it's very specific treatment used for typically tendinopathies, tennis elbow, Achilles tendonitis, rotator cuff tendonitis, patellar tendonitis, medial epicondylitis, which is golfer's elbow, tennis elbow, those sort of things. It's also been used in the research, really supporting it now for chronic OA knees, osteoarthritis in the knees, as well as bunions. And more we're using it actually to treat painful trigger points, especially with patients who do have an aversion to needles. Now, when would we use IMS? They should really and can be used very cooperatively. I mean, at the end of the day, the way we would use IMS, for instance, with a tendinopathy is we look at it like if there's tension on the attachment, we need to release that tension in order for that tendonitis to heal. If we leave that tension there, and we, as an example, if somebody goes and has a cortisone shot for a tennis elbow, oftentimes the tennis elbow just comes back because there's still that tension. There's still that protective mechanism. The muscles are tight and they're pulling on the insertion or where the muscle attaches. So what we'll use IMS for is really to release the muscles in the area so that if we are doing shockwave on the actual attachment and it heals, problem's not likely to come back. So they can be used together. It just depends on the person, depends on the problem, the state of the healing. Do we suspect a lot of scar tissue? And then from there, we kind of make our decisions as to how we're going to treat it.
And do you find, is most of these things partially covered under your insurance plan, depending?
So really, when you see us, it's a treatment as a physiotherapy treatment. So although there are different fee, we use different fee guidelines based on what you're getting. Obviously, IMS has a higher level of training and expertise to apply. Same with radial shockwave. Radial shockwave, it's really the technology. It's very expensive technology, so we do charge somewhat more, but it's still physiotherapy. So you get a bill at the end of the day for your physiotherapy. Although the radial shockwave might be a different price, you still can submit it as a physiotherapy treatment.
So you're depending on whatever your policy plan is. If you have a certain amount of percentage that goes to physio, this would just fall underneath it.
You got it. And I often look at it. You know, I'm the worst sales guy in the world, but I often look at it when I'm talking to a patient. What stage is it at? How much? If we're looking at seeing you, and maybe the treatment might be a little bit more expensive but we're only going to see you 5 times, you're probably ahead of coming 2 or 3 times a week for the next 6 weeks anyways. So we're really trying to make decisions with patients as to, number one, what's the most effective treatment? What is the time frame? Why are we doing it with a patient? And we have these chats. And then when it's appropriate, then we'll have that same conversation as to why we're doing it. And then patients have to make the decision as to how they want to spend their money, obviously.
Grant, great stuff, man. Shockwave therapy. You can try IMS. I've done both, and I found good results. I did IMS many years ago. Today was the first time I've done it probably in 7 or 8 years. And honestly, I didn't feel it's like the needles. I don't have a phobia of needles at all, but I don't ever really feel the needle entering. It's more so you feel when the muscle grabs, and then you feel that big tension, but then it releases. And you know what? 20 minutes, half an hour afterwards, I find that you've kind of loosened up and everything's good.
You do. And you kind of feel like you've had a workout afterwards. So anybody who's kind of wondering what it feels like afterwards with the shockwave, typically afterwards, it might just feel a little numb. It actually feels somewhat better. With IMS, you almost feel like you worked out. The muscles feel like they've kind of had a good workout, and that lasts a day or two. But then after that, it certainly feels quite a bit better. These treatments can be so effective. That's the kicker. One of the things, I'm an impatient guy. It's why I kind of I'm into the technology and new techniques, because I want to see my patients get better as fast as possible. And all we're trying to do is get their body to do what's necessary to get them back to what they want to do. These are 2 techniques that certainly can kickstart the process.
Grant Fedoruk from Capilano Rehab and Leading Edge Physio. As always, appreciate your time, man.
Hey, thanks for your time.
You betcha. You can go have fun with Struds. He just rolled in, little big NFL guys debating the joys of the New York Giants. Let's get to Connor Halley. Oh, he's also disappointed. Actually, somebody just tweeted me a video of the missed catches of the San Diego Chargers. Oh, man. That is tough, Con, man. That is tough. Let's get to Connor Halley Sports Center Update, brought to you by the Fred Esposito Advisory Team at National Bank Financial. Go to espositowealthmanagement.ca. You want to take care of your money? Help you invest safely, properly? Think of the future? Check it out, espositowealthmanagement.ca.